Their soldier found a little girl crying with a suitcase in the middle of the road. He decides to help, not knowing she is the daughter of a billionaire. What happens next is unbelievable. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple as Marcus Elwood adjusted the mirrors of his old car. 5 hours of non-stop driving, and there was still a long way to go until he reached home. His eyes burned with exhaustion. 3 years serving on missions that made him see the worst of humanity had left invisible scars. Marcus was returning home, but he wasn't the same man who had left. His fingers drummed on the steering wheel as the back road snaked between open fields and distant farms. The radio crackled, catching only bits of songs between stations. Marcus turned it off and let the silence fill the car. Better this way. His mind was already making too much noise with memories he'd rather forget. That's when his eyes caught something out of place in the rural landscape. A colorful blur on the shoulder of the road. Marcus slowed down, intrigued. As he got closer, the blur took shape. A child. But what the hell? Marcus hit the brakes and stopped the car a few yards ahead. He looked in the rearview mirror to confirm what he had seen. Yes, it was really a tiny little kid sitting on the shoulder, hugging her own knees. He got out of the car, on alert, looking for a broken-down vehicle or any adults nearby. Nothing. Just the empty road, open fields, and a little girl all alone. Marcus approached carefully. The girl didn't move. She must have been about 4 years old, with messy blonde hair from the wind and wide, clear eyes that stared at him with suspicion. She wore a small pink jacket over a t-shirt, jeans and colorful sneakers. She didn't look hurt, but her face was marked by the dried tracks of tears. "Hi," Marcus said, crouching down to be at her level. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl just stared at him, hugging her knees tighter. Not a word. Marcus looked around again. The sun was sinking below the horizon, and soon darkness would take over the road. There were no visible houses nearby. "Are you lost?" he tried again. Silence. The girl just blinked, her eyes fixed on him as if assessing whether she could trust him. Marcus ran a hand through his short hair, restless. He couldn't just leave her there. Night would fall soon and the temperature would drop. Besides, this road wasn't busy. It could be hours before another car passed. "Look," he said, keeping his voice calm. "It's getting dark and cold. I can't leave you here alone. How about we go to the next town to find some help?" When he held out his hand, the girl shrank back even more. Marcus pulled back a little. "All right, I won't force you to do anything. But I really can't just drive off and leave you here." Marcus thought quickly. The nearest police station was almost an hour away, and with night falling, taking the girl with him seemed like the safest option. "My name is Marcus," he introduced himself, sitting on the asphalt while keeping a distance so as not to scare her. "I'm a soldier. I just got back home after being away for a long time. I live alone in a quiet place. I can take you there, get you something to eat, and tomorrow morning we'll look for your parents. What do you think?" The girl remained silent, but something in her eyes changed. The fear seemed to have given way to a hint of curiosity. "I promise everything will be okay," Marcus assured her. "I just want to help." Slowly, he stood up and held out his hand again. This time, after a few seconds of hesitation, the girl lifted her small, trembling hand and placed it in his palm. The small and fragile touch hit Marcus like a punch, a protective instinct he didn't know he had awakened inside him. Who would leave such a small child alone on a deserted road? What had happened? Carefully, Marcus helped the girl to her feet. She didn't speak, but she allowed him to guide her to the car. When he opened the back door, he hesitated. "I don't have a car seat," he explained, feeling awkward. But I'll drive really slow, I promise." The girl climbed into the back seat and sat down, her little legs barely reaching the edge of the seat. Marcus closed the door and got in the car, adjusting the rearview mirror so he could see her. "Are you comfortable back there?" he asked. She didn't answer, just watched him with those clear, attentive eyes. Marcus started the car and began to drive, keeping the speed low. In the rearview mirror, he saw the girl looking out the window, as if searching for something or someone she had left behind. Marcus's house was about half an hour away. During the entire drive, he tried to make conversation, hoping the girl would feel safe enough to talk. Are you hungry? I can make something when we get there. I'm not a great cook, but I can make pasta and sandwiches. Nothing, just silence. Do you like stories? I have some books at home. They were mine when I was a kid. Her eyes blinked with interest, but no words came out. When they finally arrived, it was already dark. Marcus's house was simple, a one-story building with a front porch and a small, untended garden. It had been closed up for months since he had left for his last mission. "We're here," he announced, parking. "This is my house." The girl looked out the window, analyzing the place. Marcus got out of the car and opened the back door for her. Carefully, she got out and stood next to the vehicle, observing the dark house. Marcus unlocked the door and turned on the lights. Dust and stuffy air greeted him. "Sorry about the mess. It's been a while since I've been here." The girl entered hesitantly, looking around with curiosity. The living room was simple: a brown sofa, an armchair, a coffee table with some old magazines, and a small television. On the wall, a few photographs in frames. Marcus dropped his duffel bag on the floor and watched the girl. She looked exhausted, with faint dark circles under her clear eyes. "You must be hungry," he said. "Tide, I'll see what's in the kitchen." The pantry was practically empty, just a few canned goods and packets of instant noodles. In the freezer, he found a container of frozen soup that his mum had left the last time she visited, before she passed. Marcus heated the soup while the girl waited on the sofa, hugging her knees. She watched his every move attentively, as if studying his intentions. "Here," he said, bringing a steaming bowl of vegetable soup. "Careful, it's hot." The girl accepted the bowl but didn't start eating immediately. First, she looked at Marcus, then at the soup as if waiting for permission. "You can eat," he encouraged. "It's okay." Slowly, she picked up the spoon and tasted the soup. After the first spoonful, she began to eat more eagerly, and Marcus realized how hungry she must have been. While the girl ate, he brought a glass of water and sat in the armchair across from the sofa, giving her space. "You know, it would be easier to help you if I knew your name," he tried again. "Can you tell me what you're called?" The girl just kept eating, ignoring the question. When she finished the soup, Marcus took the bowl to the kitchen. Upon returning, he found the girl looking at the photos on the wall. One of them showed a younger Marcus next to a woman with graying hair and a gentle smile. "That's my mum," he explained, stopping beside her. "She used to live here with me, but she got sick and passed away a few years ago." The girl looked at him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something that looked like understanding in her eyes, as if she understood what it meant to lose someone. "Let's get a place for you to sleep," Marcus said, changing the subject. "You can stay in my room, and I'll sleep on the sofa." He led her to the small bedroom with a single bed covered by a navy blue quilt. Marcus opened the closet and took out clean sheets, quickly changing the bedding. "I don't have any pajamas your size, but..." He rummaged through the drawers and found an old t-shirt. "And this should work as a nightgown for tonight." The girl took the offered t-shirt, holding it with both hands. "The bathroom is over there." Marcus pointed to a door in the hallway. "There are clean towels in the closet, and, well, I guess you'll need help with a bath, right?" The girl looked at him with an indecipherable expression. "Okay, let's do this. I'll fill the tub with warm water and you can wash up by yourself. I'll stay right outside, and if you need anything, just call. How does that sound?" To his surprise, the girl nodded slightly. It was the first sign of communication she had shown. Marcus prepared the bath, testing the water temperature to make sure it was comfortable. He left clean towels and the folded t-shirt on the toilet lid. "It's all ready," he said. "I'll wait out here, okay?" While the girl was in the bath, Marcus sat in the hallway, his back to the bathroom door. His mind raced with 1,000 questions. Who was this child? How did she end up on the road? Where were her parents? Tomorrow he would have to take her to the police station. But what if no one was looking for her? The bathroom door opened, and the girl came out wrapped in a large towel that dragged on the floor behind her. Her wet blonde hair framed her clean little face, and without the dirt from the road, Marcus could see how crystal blue her eyes were. "Look at you. You seem to be feeling better," he smiled. "Come on, I'll help you get dressed." Marcus's t-shirt looked like a dress on the girl, reaching almost to her ankles. He led her back to the room and helped her get into bed. When he covered her with the blanket, he noticed she was shivering slightly. "Are you cold?" he asked. Marcus went to the closet and got an extra blanket, spreading it over her. "Is that better?" The girl watched him with those huge eyes but remained silent. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. "Tomorrow we'll look for your parents, okay? I'm sure they're very worried about you." Something crossed her face, a shadow of fear. Marcus noticed and felt a tightness in his chest. "Hey, it's going to be okay, I promise. You're safe here." He stood up to leave but felt a small hand grab his wrist. The girl was looking at him with a pleading expression. "Do you want me to stay a little longer?" he asked. A small positive nod. Marcus sat down again. "All right. I'll stay until you fall asleep." He began to hum a lullaby that his mother used to sing when he was little. Gradually, he saw the girl's eyes grow heavy. Before falling completely asleep, she reached out and held his hand, as if needing to make sure he wouldn't leave. When her breathing finally became deep and regular, Marcus carefully let go and left the room, leaving the door ajar. In the living room, he picked up the phone and hesitated. Should he call the police now? But it was late, and the girl was exhausted. Maybe it was better to wait until morning. Marcus settled on the sofa, knowing he wouldn't sleep well. His thoughts were fixed on the little blonde girl sleeping in his room, a child who wouldn't speak, abandoned on a deserted road. While staring at the ceiling, Marcus made a silent promise. He would protect her, no matter what happened. Maybe this was what he needed to finally leave behind the ghosts of the battles he had fought. Maybe taking care of this girl was the way to recover something he didn't even know he had lost. Marcus woke up to the first rays of sun streaming through the living room window. His neck ached from the awkward way he had slept on the sofa. He got up silently and went to the bedroom, peeking through the ajar door. The girl was still asleep, wrapped in the blankets like a protective cocoon. Only her blonde hair spread across the pillow revealed her presence there. Marcus watched her peaceful breathing and closed the door carefully. In the kitchen, he brewed a strong cup of coffee for himself. As he drank it, he looked out the window, thinking about what to do. The plan was to take the girl to the police station today, but something bothered him. The way she cowered, the persistent silence, the fear in her clear eyes. There was a story there, and Marcus wasn't sure that handing her over to the authorities immediately would be the best thing. "She needs to trust someone first," he muttered to himself. He grabbed his car keys and left, leaving a note on the coffee table. "Be back soon, there's cereal and milk in the kitchen, Marcus." The small convenience store on the corner of the main street was almost empty at that time of the morning. Marcus walked through the aisles, unsure of what to buy. What would a 4-year-old girl like? He passed the toy section and stopped in front of a shelf with some teddy bears. After considering for a moment, he chose a medium-sized brown bear with a red ribbon around its neck and bright eyes. It looked friendly and comforting. In the stationery section, he found a notebook with a floral cover, full of butterflies and colorful flowers. He also grabbed a box of colored markers. Maybe drawing could help her express herself, since words seemed to be difficult. While waiting in the checkout line, Marcus also added a few chocolate bars and a box of animal crackers. The cashier smiled as she scanned the items. "A gift for your daughter?" she asked kindly. Marcus hesitated. "No. It's for a child I'm helping." He paid quickly and left, feeling strangely nervous. What if she didn't like the gifts? What if she continued to not speak? When he got home, he found the girl sitting on the sofa, exactly where the table was visible. The note was in her small hands. Though Marcus doubted she could read, the bowl of cereal in front of her was half eaten. Good morning," he said softly, closing the door behind him. "I see you found breakfast." She just watched him with those huge eyes, without responding. Marcus noticed she had put on the same clothes from the day before, now clean and dry. He had washed and dried them during the night. "I brought some things for you," he continued, sitting in the armchair across from the sofa, keeping his distance so as not to intimidate her. He placed the shopping bag on the floor between them and smiled. "Want to see what's inside?" The girl looked at the bag with curiosity but didn't move. "All right, then I'll show you," Marcus said, opening the bag. First, he took out the brown teddy bear, holding it carefully. This guy here looked like he needed a friend. I thought you two might get along." The girl's eyes widened slightly, fixed on the toy. Marcus also took out the floral notebook and the markers. "And I thought maybe you'd like to draw or color. I'm sure you draw better than I do." Finally, he showed her the chocolate and the cookies. "And this is for later if you want." He placed everything on the floor between them and waited. The girl looked at the gifts and then at Marcus, as if trying to understand his intentions. "It's all for you if you want it," he said in a calm voice, kneeling on the floor to be more at her level. "No strings attached." Slowly, like a cautious little animal, she slid off the sofa and approached. First, she touched the notebook with her fingertips, running them over the colorful flowers on the cover. Then her attention turned to the bear. She picked it up carefully, as if it were something precious and fragile. Holding it with both hands, she examined its plush face, the bright eyes, the red ribbon. Then, in a gesture that made Marcus's heart ache, she brought the bear to her face and pressed her cheek against the soft fabric, closing her eyes for a moment. It was the first sign that she was starting to trust him. Marcus smiled, feeling a wave of relief. "Looks like you two are going to get along." She hugged the bear to her chest and, for the first time, her lips curved into a small smile. It was subtle, just a slight lifting of the corners of her mouth. But for Marcus, it was like watching the sun rise. "How about we give him a name?" he suggested. The girl looked at the bear, thoughtful but didn't answer. "All right, we don't have to decide now," Marcus said, not pushing. "He can wait." She sat on the floor and pulled the notebook closer. Marcus opened the box of markers for her and watched as the girl carefully chose a green marker. With concentration, she began to draw in the new notebook. Marcus left her to it and went to the kitchen to prepare lunch. From time to time, he would peek discreetly into the living room, seeing her completely absorbed in her drawings, the teddy bear firmly propped up beside her. That simple scene, a child drawing on the living room floor, stirred a strange feeling in Marcus, as if his house, which had always seemed empty since his mother's death, had finally come to life again. As he prepared pasta with tomato sauce, Marcus tried to plan his next steps. Should he take the girl to the police station today? Or would it be better to wait a little longer, until she felt safe enough to talk about what happened? Lunch passed in a friendly silence. The girl ate with appetite, the teddy bear sitting in the chair next to her like a guest of honor. Afterward, she returned to her drawings in the living room while Marcus did the dishes. The day passed peacefully. In the evening, after a simple dinner, Marcus prepared a warm bath for her and then helped her get settled in bed, the bear held tightly against her chest. "Good night, little one," he said softly, tucking her in. "We'll talk more tomorrow, okay?" She just watched him with those clear, attentive eyes, and Marcus had the impression that there was less fear in them now. The next morning, Marcus awoke to the sound of paper being turned. He opened his eyes and saw the girl sitting on the living room floor, near the sofa where he slept, drawing intently in her notebook. The teddy bear was propped up beside her, like a silent guardian. "Good morning," Marcus said, stretching. "Sleep well?" She briefly looked up and nodded, another small step forward. "What are you drawing?" he asked, sitting up and leaning over to get a better look. The girl turned the notebook towards him. The drawing showed two stick figures, one big and one small, holding hands. Next to the smaller figure was what looked like a brown bear. "Is that us?" Marcus asked, feeling a wave of emotion. She nodded again with a small smile. "It's beautiful," he praised sincerely. After breakfast, Marcus decided they needed some fresh air. The day was sunny and pleasant, perfect for a walk. "How about we go to the park nearby?" he suggested. "It has a nice playground and we can bring a snack." The girl seemed to consider the idea. After a moment, she picked up the bear and the notebook as if to indicate she was ready. The park was just a few blocks away. On the way, Marcus talked calmly about the neighborhood, pointing out the corner bakery, the public library, and the elementary school. The girl walked beside him, the bear held firmly under one arm, her other hand occasionally holding Marcus's when they crossed the streets. At the playground, there were a few other children playing. The girl watched them for a while but preferred to sit on a bench with Marcus, hugging her bear and observing everything around her. "Want to try the swings?" Marcus asked after a while. "I can push you." To his surprise, she nodded and allowed him to guide her to the swings. Marcus helped her up and began to push her gently. The first real smile appeared then, a smile that lit up the girl's entire face as she flew gently back and forth. The sound of a soft giggle escaped her lips, making Marcus's heart leap. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. They spent the morning at the park, alternating between the swings, the slide, and breaks for drawing under the shade of a large tree. The girl seemed more relaxed, less scared, although she still didn't speak. On the way home, they stopped at the small grocery store to buy ingredients for lunch. The girl held Marcus's hand as they walked through the aisles, helping to choose fruits and pointing to things that caught her attention. "I think we're making progress, aren't we?" Marcus said as they made sandwiches together in the kitchen. She nodded, smiling shyly as she placed a slice of cheese on the bread. The afternoon arrived, quiet and warm. Marcus opened the windows, letting the gentle breeze in. He sat in the armchair with a book, while the girl went back to drawing, sitting on the living room rug, her bear faithfully by her side. From time to time, Marcus would look up from his book, watching her concentrated on her artistic work. Her blonde hair fell over her face, and she would push it away with a distracted gesture. Her tongue would sometimes stick out of the corner of her mouth when she was focused on a particularly difficult detail. There was something deeply comforting about that domestic scene. For a brief moment, Marcus allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if this were his normal life. Quiet days at home, taking care of a child, far from the missions and the horrors he had seen. The sound of the colored pencil against the paper was the only noise in the room, aside from the occasional turning of pages in Marcus's book. Time seemed to flow at a different, gentler pace. It was then that it happened. The girl looked up from her drawing and looked directly at Marcus. There was a different expression on her face, as if she had made an important decision. She hesitated for a moment, her lips moving silently as if rehearsing. And then, in a whisper so quiet Marcus almost didn't hear it, she said, "Lila." Marcus slowly lowered his book, afraid to break the moment. "Is your name Lila?" A small nod confirmed it. "Lila," Marcus repeated softly. "That's a very beautiful name." A shy smile crossed her face, and Marcus felt as if he had just witnessed a small miracle. "It's very nice to meet you, Lila," he said formally, extending his hand as if they were meeting for the first time. "I'm Marcus." To his surprise, she took his hand and shook it briefly with her little fingers. Then she hugged the teddy bear against her chest and, in a tiny voice, it continued, "Thank you for getting me off the road. I was very scared." The words were simple, but they hit Marcus like a punch. The reality of the situation, a 4-year-old child, alone on a deserted road, came back with full force. What had happened to her? How did she end up there? But he kept his expression gentle, not wanting to scare her now that she was finally starting to talk. "You don't have to thank me, Lila," he replied gently. "I'm glad I found you. No one should be alone on a road, especially not a brave little girl like you." Lila looked down, her fingers playing with the bear's red ribbon. "Can I ask you something, Lila?" Marcus continued gently. "How did you end up on that road?" She hugged the bear tighter, and Marcus saw the fear returning to her eyes. "It's okay." He immediately backed off. "We don't have to talk about it now. Whenever you're ready." Lila nodded, visibly relieved. "What matters is that you're safe now," Marcus assured her. "And I'm going to help you find your family, I promise." A shadow passed over Lila's face at the word family, and Marcus made a mental note. There was a story there, something painful, but he wouldn't push her. She would talk when she was ready. "Does your bear have a name yet?" he asked, changing the subject. Lila looked at the toy thoughtfully. "Brownie," she said after a moment, her voice a little firmer now. "Brownie," Marcus repeated, smiling. "That suits him perfectly." Lila smiled back, and something in that smile made Marcus feel a pang in his chest. This was the beginning of something important. He didn't know exactly what or how it would end, but he felt with certainty that his life had just changed forever. The rest of the afternoon passed in a new atmosphere. Lila still spoke little, but each word felt like a precious gift. She showed Marcus her drawings, explaining with short sentences what she had made. In one of them, there were 3 figures, the 2 from before and a third, smaller one. "Who's this?" Marcus asked, pointing to the 3rd figure. "Brownie," Lila replied, as if it were obvious. "He's part of the family now." Family. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Marcus didn't correct the implication that they formed a family. Him, Lila, and a teddy bear named Brownie. As strange as it was, somehow it felt right. That night, when he put her to bed, Lila held his hand before he could leave the room. "Marcus," she said, testing his name out loud for the first time, "you're going to stay, right?" "I'll be right here," he promised. "I'll sleep in the living room right nearby. If you need anything, just call." She nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. She hugged Brownie to her chest and closed her eyes. Marcus watched her for a moment before leaving, an abandoned child and a lonely soldier, both desperately needing someone. Fate had a strange sense of humor. As he settled on the sofa, Marcus knew that tomorrow he would have to make difficult decisions. He should take Lila to the authorities, tell them about the strange circumstances in which he found her. It was the right procedure. But something in his heart resisted the idea, the fear in her eyes when he mentioned family, the way she was finally starting to trust him. He needed to find out more about what happened before handing her over to strangers. Marcus fell asleep thinking of her words, so simple and so profound. "Thank you for getting me off the road." It wasn't just the physical road he had taken her from, he realized. It was from some dark and frightening path that no child should ever have to walk alone. And for some reason he couldn't fully explain, he felt that their paths were now irreversibly intertwined. The following days brought a quiet routine to Marcus's house. Lila talked more and more, though still in short, simple sentences. She rarely let go of Brownie, the brown teddy bear, as if he were a shield against bad memories. On the 4th night since he had found her on the road, Marcus made vegetable soup for dinner, the same recipe his mother used to make when he was a child. The warm, comforting aroma filled the small kitchen as a light rain tapped against the windows. Lila sat at the table, swinging her little legs that didn't reach the floor. Brownie occupied the chair beside her, as had become custom. Marcus placed a steaming bowl in front of her and another for himself, sitting across from her. "Careful, it's hot," he warned, blowing on his own spoon to set an example. Lila mimicked the gesture, blowing carefully before tasting the soup. A small smile appeared on her face. "Yummy," she said, taking another spoonful. "It was my mum's favorite," Marcus commented, breaking off a piece of bread. "She used to say that hot soup cures any sadness." Lila looked at him with curiosity. "Do you miss her?" The question, so direct and innocent, caught Marcus by surprise. "Yes," he answered honestly. "Every day." Silence fell between them for a few moments, just the sound of spoons against the bowls and the rain outside. "I miss my mum too," Lila said suddenly, looking down at her soup. "She went to heaven when I was a baby." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. It was the first time Lila had mentioned her family. "I'm sorry, Lila," he said softly. She shrugged, a strangely adult gesture for such a small child. "I don't remember her. I've only seen pictures." Marcus hesitated, unsure if he should ask more. He didn't want to push, but he needed to understand what had happened. "And your dad?" he finally asked, keeping his voice casual. Lila stopped eating, her spoon suspended in the air. Her blue eyes filled with water. "He doesn't want me anymore," she whispered. Marcus felt as if something icy ran down his spine. "Who told you that, Lila?" "Claire," she replied, putting down her spoon. "My new mommy." "Your stepmom," Marcus corrected gently. Lila nodded, pressing her lips together. "She doesn't like me. She says I make noise and a mess." Marcus took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What happened the day I found you, Lila? Can you tell me?" She wrapped her arms around herself, as if she suddenly felt cold. Marcus realized she was fighting back tears. "It's okay," he assured her. "You're safe here." Lila looked at Brownie as if drawing courage from the teddy bear. After a long moment, she began to speak, her small voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. Daddy went away for work. Claire said she was going to take me for ice cream. Marcus nodded, encouraging her to continue. We drove for a long, long time, Lila continued, frowning at the memory. I asked, "Where's the ice cream?" and she said, "Oh, shut up." A tear rolled down her face, and Marcus had to control himself to not show the anger that was beginning to build inside him. Then she stopped the car on the road. Lila continued. Her voice choked. She said that Daddy didn't want me anymore because he was going to have another baby with her. A real baby of their own. Marcus closed his eyes for a second, trying to process the cruelty of those words. She told me to get out of the car, Lila sobbed, the tears now flowing freely. I didn't want to, but she yelled a lot and I got scared. Then she drove away and left me there. Her voice broke on the last word, and sobs took over her small body. Marcus stood up immediately and knelt beside her, opening his arms. Lila threw herself against his chest, crying uncontrollably. Shh, it's all okay now, he murmured, hugging her carefully. You're safe. No one is going to hurt you here. Marcus felt a mix of emotions, a burning rage against the woman who had abandoned a child on a deserted road, a deep sadness for Lila's pain, and a fierce determination to protect her. I was so scared, Lila sobbed against his shirt. It was dark and cold and there were strange noises. I know, little one, Marcus said, rocking her gently, but you were very brave. Very, very brave. They stayed like that for a long time, until Lila's sobs subsided to occasional sniffles. Marcus took a napkin and gently wiped the tears from her little face. Lila, look at me, he said firmly. When her blue eyes met his, he continued, What Claire said isn't true. No real father would abandon his daughter. I'm sure your dad is looking for you right now. Desperate. Really? She asked with a trembling voice. Really? Marcus guaranteed. And tomorrow we're going to the police station to help your dad find you. Lila bit her lip, looking scared. So what if he's not looking for me? Then I'll take care of you, Marcus replied without hesitation. I promise you will never go through something like this again. Lila looked at him with her big blue eyes, as if assessing the sincerity of that promise. After a moment, she nodded, seeming to accept his words. Can I keep Brownie? She asked in a low voice. Of course you can, Marcus smiled, brushing a blonde strand from her face. Brownie is your friend, and friends stick together. Lila pulled away a little and looked at the soup, now cold in the bowls. I'm not hungry anymore. That's okay, Marcus said, standing up. How about some hot chocolate and then bed? We have a big day tomorrow. She nodded, seeming relieved to not have to talk about it anymore. Marcus made hot chocolate, adding small marshmallows that floated like tiny white islands. Lila drank in silence, occasionally offering a sip to the teddy bear. As he helped her get ready for bed, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what he had heard. How could someone be so cruel to a child? Abandoning a 4-year-old girl on a deserted road wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. Lila settled into bed, Brownie held tightly against her chest. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was a new tranquility in them, as if sharing her secret had lifted a great weight. Marcus, she called out as he was about to leave the room. Yes, thank you for not leaving me. The simple words hit Marcus hard, and he had to swallow the lump that formed in his throat. I'll never leave you, Lila, he promised. Good night, little one. Good night, she replied, her eyes already closed. In the living room, Marcus sat on the sofa and ran his hands over his face. Tomorrow they would go to the police station. He would tell them everything, how he found Lila, what she revealed about the abandonment. He hoped they could locate her father quickly. But a part of him, a part he didn't want to admit, feared what would happen next. What if the father was involved? What if Lila ended up in a children's shelter? Marcus shook his head, pushing those thoughts away. The important thing now was to do what was right for Lila. She deserved to be with her family, her real family, who loved her, even if it meant saying goodbye. The next morning, the sky was covered with grey clouds. Marcus prepared breakfast in silence, while Lila, sitting at the table with Brownie by her side, played distractedly with the cereal in her bowl. "Not hungry?" Marcus asked, sitting across from her. Lila shrugged, without looking up. "Are we really going to the police station today?" The question was loaded with anxiety. Marcus could see how her little fingers gripped the spoon tightly. "Yes, little one, we need to find your dad," he replied gently. "I'm sure he's very worried about you." Lila bit her lower lip. "And what if he's not?" Marcus reached his hand across the table and touched hers lightly. "Then we'll figure it out together, okay? One step at a time." She nodded, not looking entirely convinced, but went back to eating her cereal. After breakfast, Marcus helped Lila get ready. He had washed her clothes again, the same jeans, t-shirt and pink jacket she was wearing when he found her. They looked small and worn now after days of continuous use. "I think we need to buy you some new clothes," he commented while fixing her hair. "What do you think?" A small smile appeared on Lila's face. "Can I choose?" "Of course you can," Marcus smiled back, relieved to see her a little more cheerful. On the way to the police station, Lila was silent in the back seat, hugging Brownie and looking out the window. From time to time, Marcus would watch her in the rearview mirror, trying to decipher her thoughts. What was going through the mind of a 4-year-old who had been abandoned by her stepmother and was now about to face the authorities? The police station was in the center of town, a 2-story brick building with an American flag fluttering at the entrance. Marcus parked and turned off the engine, taking a deep breath before turning to Lila. "We're going to go in and talk to the police officers, okay? They're good people who will help us." Lila squeezed Brownie against her chest. "Are you going to stay with me the whole time?" "The whole time," Marcus guaranteed. "I promise." She held out her pinky finger. "Pinky promise?" Marcus smiled and linked his finger with hers. "Pinky promise?" Inside the station, the air smelled of old coffee and paper. A middle-aged officer with graying hair at his temples greeted them at the reception desk. "How can I help you?" he asked, looking from Marcus to Lila with curiosity. "I need to report a case of child abandonment," Marcus replied in a low voice, not wanting to scare Lila. "I found this little girl alone on a road 4 days ago." The officer, whose name tag identified him as Officer Reynolds, immediately became more attentive. He looked at Lila, who partially hid behind Marcus's leg. "Why don't you come with me to a more private room?" Reynolds suggested, pointing down a side hallway. The room was small, with a wooden table, 3 chairs, and faded beige walls. Reynolds offered them water and asked if Lila would like a hot chocolate. When she shyly nodded, he smiled and asked a passing officer to get the drink. "Now," said Reynolds, sitting across from them and opening a notepad, "can you tell me exactly what happened?" Marcus recounted everything: how he found Lila sitting alone on the shoulder of Highway 16, how he took her home because it was getting dark, and how she finally revealed that her stepmother had deliberately abandoned her. Reynolds listened with a grave expression, occasionally taking notes. When Marcus finished, the officer turned to Lila, who was sipping her hot chocolate in silence. "Hi, Lila," he said in a gentle voice. "Can you tell me your full name?" Lila looked at Marcus, who gave an encouraging nod. "Lila Whitford," she answered in a small voice. "And how old are you, Lila?" 4. "I'm turning 5 on Halloween." "Halloween, huh? That's cool." Reynolds smiled. "And do you know your dad's name?" "Derek," she replied. "Derek Whitford." "And where do you live?" Lila frowned, thinking. "In the blue house with the white flowers out front." Marcus realized she didn't know the address, normal for such a young child. Reynolds jotted down the information and stood up. "I'm going to check our records. I'll be back in a few minutes." As the officer left, Lila leaned towards Marcus. "Is he going to find my daddy?" "I hope so, little one," Marcus replied, trying to sound confident. Minutes turned into almost an hour. Lila had finished her chocolate and was now drawing on a pad of paper a kind officer had given her. Marcus watched the clock on the wall, feeling his anxiety grow with each passing minute. Finally, Reynolds returned, accompanied by a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as the county social worker. The officer's face was serious, and Marcus felt a pit in his stomach. "Mr. Elwood," Reynolds began, sitting down again, "we've checked all missing persons records from the last few weeks. There is no report for a child named Lila Whitford. In fact, we can't find any Derek Whitford registered in our county or the neighboring ones. Marcus felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. What do you mean? That's not possible. She was abandoned 4 days ago. Her father must be looking for her. Reynolds shook his head slowly. No one has reported a child matching her description missing. We are going to expand the search statewide and issue an alert, but for now. The social worker leaned forward. For now, we need to find a safe place for Lila to stay while we continue the search for her family. Marcus looked at Lila, who continued to draw, seemingly oblivious to the conversation. His heart ached at the thought of what that meant. She can stay with me, he said firmly. She's been at my house for 4 days already. She's adapting well. The social worker, a woman of about 50 with a compassionate expression, looked at him hesitantly. I understand your concern, Mr. Elwood, but there are procedures to follow. Normally, in cases like this, the child is temporarily placed with a licensed foster family. I'm in the military, Marcus argued. I have a clean record. I can provide references. Lila has been through enough trauma being abandoned. Taking her from an environment where she's finally started to feel safe will only make things worse. Reynolds and the social worker exchanged glances. We'll need background checks, home visits, the social worker began. Do whatever is necessary, Marcus interrupted. But please, don't separate her from me now. After a long discussion and several signed forms, they reached an agreement. Lila could remain in Marcus's temporary care while the authorities continued to search for her family. There would be weekly visits from the social worker, and Marcus would have to attend a family court hearing the following week. It was late afternoon when they finally left the police station. Lila, exhausted from hours of waiting and questioning, could barely keep her eyes open. Marcus settled her in the back seat of the car, carefully buckling her seatbelt. Are we going home now? She asked sleepily, hugging Brownie. Yes, little one. We're going home, Marcus replied, feeling a lump in his throat as he realized how much those words meant now. As he drove through the streets that were beginning to light up with the falling night, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the situation. How was it possible that no one had reported Lila's disappearance? Wouldn't a father who truly cared move heaven and earth to find his daughter? In the rearview mirror, he saw that Lila had already fallen asleep, her head lolling slightly to the side, her arms still wrapped tightly around the teddy bear. Her little face was peaceful in sleep, with no sign of the worries that plagued her when she was awake. Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions. Helplessness in the face of the complicated situation, anger at the apparent indifference of Lila's father, and a growing sense of responsibility for this small life that, for some mysterious reason, had been placed in his path. What would happen now? What if they never found her family? Or worse, what if they found them and discovered that the father really didn't want her? As the unanswered questions swirled in his mind, Marcus made a silent decision. No matter what happened, he would protect Lila. Somehow, they would make this work. The road ahead of him seemed like a reflection of his life now, uncertain and full of unexpected turns, but somehow also full of possibilities. The days turned into weeks. Autumn advanced, painting the trees in shades of red and gold, and Marcus and Lila's life fell into a surprisingly natural routine. The social worker, Mrs. Bennett, made her weekly visits, observing the changes in the house with silent approval. Marcus had transformed the small guest room into a suitable space for Lila, with freshly painted walls in a soft shade of lavender. A new bed with a star-patterned comforter, a small bookshelf with children's books, and a colorful dresser now occupied the previously empty space. The search for Lila's father continued, but with no results. No Derek Whitford had reported a missing daughter, and the authorities expanded the search to neighboring states. Marcus tried not to think about it too much, focusing on giving Lila the stability she needed while the search went on. The first few nights were difficult. Lila would wake up crying from nightmares, calling for her father. Marcus would rush to her room, sit on the edge of the bed, and comfort her until she fell back asleep. But gradually, the nightmares became less frequent. During the day, Lila blossomed. Her personality began to emerge, curious, intelligent, and surprisingly resilient, for a child who had been through so much. She talked more and more, asking questions about everything from why the sky is blue to how the TV remote worked. Marcus discovered that he enjoyed answering her questions, even when he wasn't sure of the answer. "Let's find out together," became a common phrase between them, followed by searches in books or on the computer. On a particularly sunny afternoon, after weeks of rain, Marcus took Lila to the park. She ran through the grass, chasing butterflies and laughing, a sound he never tired of hearing. Brownie, the bear, watched from the bench where Marcus had placed him to sunbathe, as Lila had insisted. When they returned home, Lila asked to draw. Marcus set up the small table in the living room with paper and her colored markers, now supplemented with crayons and colored pencils he had bought. While she concentrated on her new drawing, Marcus prepared dinner in the kitchen, keeping an eye on her through the open door. "What are you drawing today?" he asked, while chopping carrots for the stew. "Us," Lila replied without looking up from the paper. Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. It was incredible how in such a short time this little girl had become so important in his life. The drawing took shape under Lila's small hands, 2 stick figures, one large and one small, holding hands. Beside them, a brown bear the size of the smaller figure. A house with large windows and colorful flowers in the garden completed the scene. Almost all of Lila's drawings now showed the two of them together, sometimes with Brownie, sometimes doing things they had done, like walking in the park or cooking together. Marcus carefully kept each one in a special folder. As the stew simmered on low heat, Marcus sat at the table with Lila, watching her work. Her blonde hair fell over her concentrated face, and she distractedly pushed it away with her hand, leaving a small blue smudge on her cheek. Suddenly, without warning, Lila looked up from the paper and asked, "Do you have a family, Marcus?" The question caught him off guard. It was typical of Lila to ask direct questions without beating around the bush as only children can. Marcus took a deep breath before answering. There was something in the innocence of those blue eyes that demanded honesty. "I used to live with my mom," he began, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest whenever he spoke of her. "She got very sick and passed away. After that, I didn't know what to do, so I joined the army." Lila lowered her head, processing the information. Her small fingers played with the blue pencil. "I'm sorry," she said finally, with a seriousness beyond her years. "I lost my mum too, and my dad got married again." Marcus felt his heart ache. There was so much in common between them. Two people marked by loss, finding comfort in each other. He reached out and gently ran his hand through her hair, tucking a blonde strand behind her ear. "Sometimes the hardest things lead us to places we never imagined," he said softly. Lila seemed to reflect on this for a moment. Then, to Marcus's surprise, she smiled, a bright smile that reached her eyes, and hugged Brownie, who was sitting in her lap. "Like you finding me on the road?" she asked. "Exactly," Marcus smiled back. Silence fell between them for a moment, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that exists between people who understand each other. "The stew should be ready," Marcus said finally, getting up. "Want to help me set the table?" Lila nodded enthusiastically, carefully putting away her pencils. She now had small chores that she performed with pride, helping set the table, putting away her toys, feeding the fish they had bought together for the small aquarium in the living room. As they ate dinner, Marcus observed how Lila had changed since that first night. It wasn't just that she talked more or smiled more. There was a confidence in her now, a sense of security that didn't exist before. "Tomorrow is grocery day," he commented. "Want to make the list with me after dinner?" "Can I ask for chocolate chip cookies?" Lila asked hopefully. I think so." Marcus pretended to consider it seriously. "But only if you help me pick out vegetables too." "Deal," she replied promptly, holding out her small hand. Marcus shook it solemnly, holding back a laugh. Negotiating with Lila was becoming an art. She was a quick learner in the game of give and take. After dinner, they sat together on the sofa with a paper and pen to make the shopping list. Lila dictated items while Marcus wrote, occasionally suggesting things she forgot. Milk, apples, chocolate chip cookies, carrots, drawing paper. orange juice. The list grew. A mix of Marcus's practical needs and Lila's small desires. Like everything in their lives now, intertwined, shared. When they finished, Lila yawned, rubbing her eyes. "I think someone's ready for bed," Marcus observed. "Not yet," she protested, but another yawn betrayed her. "Come on, little one. Time for a bath and then bed." The nightly routine unfolded with the comfortable familiarity of established habits. Bath, pajamas, now her own, with star prints that Lila had chosen. Brushing teeth, and a bedtime story. Lila chose a book about a family of rabbits, her favorite of the week, and climbed into bed, arranging Brownie beside her. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and began to read, doing different voices for each character, which made her giggle. When the story was over, Lila looked at him with eyes already heavy with sleep. "Marcus, yes? Do you think my dad is looking for me?" The question caught Marcus off guard, a painful reminder of the temporary situation they were living in. He hesitated, wanting to be honest, but also not wanting to hurt her. "I'm sure he is, Lila," he finally replied. Maybe he doesn't know where to look, or maybe something happened that's stopping him, but we're still looking for him, and we're going to find him." She nodded, seeming to accept the answer for now. "When we find my dad, will you still visit me?" Marcus felt a lump in his throat. It was a question he himself had been avoiding, the inevitable moment when he would have to return Lila to her real family. "Of course I will," he promised, trying to keep his voice steady. "If your dad allows it, I would be very happy to visit you." That seemed to reassure her. Lila smiled and snuggled deeper under the covers. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Lila." He leaned down and lightly kissed her forehead. Before leaving the room, he paused at the door and looked back. Lila was already almost asleep, hugging Brownie, her serene little face in the soft light of the lamp. In the living room, Marcus took the folder with Lila's drawings and slowly flipped through them. On every page, the same basic image, the two of them together, happy. For a 4-year-old, the world was that simple. People who cared about each other stayed together. He knew that reality was more complicated. He knew his role in Lila's life was temporary, just a guardian until her real father was found. But that didn't diminish the affection he felt for her, nor did it make the bond they were forming any less real. In the armchair in the living room, watching the stars through the window, Marcus thought about how life could change in an instant. A month ago, he was just a lonely soldier returning to an empty house. Now, he was the temporary protector of a little girl who had brought light and purpose to his days. Whatever the future held, Marcus knew he would never forget these weeks. The bonds growing between them might be temporary, but they were real, and for now that was enough. The rain fell heavily in Seattle, washing the streets and creating a grey veil over the city. Derek Whitford looked out the taxi window, exhausted after a 3-week business trip. His briefcase rested beside him, full of signed contracts and the satisfaction of a job well done. All he wanted now was to get home, hug his daughter, and rest. The taxi stopped in front of a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. It was an elegant building, with a well-kept garden and a light blue facade. Derek paid the fare, grabbed his suitcase, and ran under the rain to the porch. He had barely put the key in the lock when the door swung open. Claire, his wife of 2 years, stood there, her eyes red and swollen, her face streaked with tears. Derek felt an immediate tightness in his chest. "What happened?" he asked, dropping the suitcase on the floor of the entryway. Claire sobbed and threw her arms around him. "Oh, Derek, it's Lila. She's gone." Derek's world seemed to freeze. "What do you mean, gone? What are you talking about?" Claire pulled away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hands. "She was playing in the backyard. I just went inside for a minute to answer the phone. When I came back, she had vanished." Derek felt his legs go weak. He leaned against the wall, trying to process what he was hearing. "When was this?" he asked, his voice strained. 4 days ago, Claire replied, sobbing. "I looked everywhere. I called all the neighbors. I called the police." 4 days, Derek nearly shouted. "My daughter has been missing for 4 days and you're only telling me now." "I tried to call you," Claire protested. "Your cell was out of service. I left messages at the hotel, but they said you were in meetings out of town. It was true. The last part of his trip had been in remote areas, visiting industrial facilities where the signal was poor. Derek had checked his messages, but there was nothing from Claire. Just a few work emails he answered quickly. What did the police say? He asked, running his hands through his damp hair, trying to calm himself. They're looking, but they have no leads. No one saw anything, no security cameras caught. It's like she just disappeared. Derek ran to the phone and dialed the police station's number. He identified himself and asked to speak with the detective in charge of the case. The conversation was brief and frustrating. No news, no concrete leads, just promises that they were doing everything they could. Hanging up the phone, Derek turned to Claire. I'm going out to look. You stay here in case she comes back or someone calls with information. But it's raining, and it's already night. She's my daughter, Derek yelled, the tension finally breaking his composure. I'm not going to sit around while she's out there, lost and scared. Derek walked out the door without waiting for a response. He spent hours driving through the neighborhood streets, then expanding to nearby areas, stopping and asking anyone he met, showing them the photo of Lila he kept in his wallet. A blonde girl with bright blue eyes, smiling with a missing front tooth. No one had seen anything. The rain continued, relentless, and the night wore on. Around 3 a.m, Derek returned home, drenched and defeated. Claire was asleep on the sofa, a phone in her lap. Derek went upstairs and into Lila's room. It was a cheerful space, with lavender walls and star stickers on the ceiling. The bed was made, the pink blanket stretched over the mattress, the stuffed animals lined up against the headboard, except for one. Derek frowned, noticing the absence of the brown bear that Lila carried everywhere. He sat on the bed that was too small for his adult body and picked up the frame from the nightstand, a photo of him and Lila on her last birthday. 4 years old. His little girl was only 4 years old and was lost somewhere. Where are you, princess? He whispered to the empty room. Derek couldn't sleep. Sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in front of him, he tried to understand how it all had happened. Claire's story didn't make complete sense. Lila would never leave the yard by herself. She was cautious, even shy with strangers. And even if she had left, how had no one seen her? A 4-year-old girl alone would surely draw attention. As the sun began to rise, Derek had made a decision. He picked up the phone and called his friend Thomas Tutz, who worked at a local TV station. I need your help, he said as soon as Thomas answered, sleepily. My daughter is missing. 2 hours later, Derek was at the KTCS Channel 9 studio, recording an appeal that would air on the morning news. The makeup couldn't completely hide his deep, dark circles and devastated expression. My name is Derek Whitford, he began, looking directly at the camera, holding Lila's photo. This is my daughter, Lila. She is 4 years old and has been missing for 5 days. She disappeared from our home in Queen Anne's, Seattle, while playing in the yard. She is blonde, has blue eyes, and was last seen wearing a pink jacket, jeans, and colorful sneakers. Derek took a deep breath, fighting back tears. If you have seen Lila, or have any information, please contact the police or the number on the screen. Lila, if by some miracle you are watching, Daddy loves you very much and is going to find you. I promise. The appeal aired on the morning news, along with Lila's photo and a contact number. Thomas promised they would repeat the story on the noon and evening newscasts and share it with other stations. Meanwhile, over 100 miles away, Marcus and Lila were having breakfast in front of the small TV in the kitchen. It was Saturday, and Marcus had made pancakes in funny shapes, getting laughs out of Lila when he presented one that was supposed to look like an elephant, but more closely resembled a shapeless cloud. It's a baby elephant, Marcus insisted, feigning indignation as Lila laughed harder. It looks more like Brownie after he fell in the puddle, Lila commented, referring to the previous day when they had gone for a walk, and the bear had ended up in a mud puddle. Marcus smiled, watching how Lila had blossomed in recent weeks. She still asked about her father occasionally, but the questions came with less frequency and urgency. Marcus worried about this. He didn't want her to forget her real family. But he also couldn't deny that he was growing more and more attached to the girl. The social worker had said on her last visit that they were considering formalizing Marcus's status as a temporary guardian, given that no family member had yet been found. Marcus had conflicting feelings about this. On one hand, it meant Lila could stay with him longer. On the other, it meant her father really wasn't looking for her. What kind of father wouldn't move mountains to find his daughter? The morning news started on the TV, and Marcus turned up the volume a bit as he ate his pancakes. Local news first. The weather. An accident on the main highway. The opening of a new park. "Can I have extra syrup?" Lila asked, her face already smeared with maple syrup. "Just a little more," Marcus conceded, grabbing the bottle. "Or you'll be stickier than wallpaper." Lila laughed at the comparison, holding out her plate. It was at that moment that the anchor's voice shifted to a more serious tone. "And now a special appeal. A 4-year-old girl has been missing for 5 days in Seattle. Her parents are desperate for information." Marcus barely registered the words, busy pouring the syrup. But then the sound from the TV captured his full attention. "My name is Derek Whitford. This is my daughter, Lila." The syrup bottle slipped from Marcus's fingers, spilling onto the table. On the screen, a man of about 35, with deep dark circles and a devastated expression, held a photo of a blonde girl with blue eyes, the same girl who was now sitting at his table. "Lila, if by some miracle you are watching, Daddy loves you very much and is going to find you, I promise." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Marcus looked at Lila, who had frozen, her fork in the air, her wide eyes fixed on the TV. The syrup dripped down the table, pooling on the floor, but no one moved to clean it up. Then, slowly, Lila pointed to the screen with a trembling hand. "That's my daddy," she whispered, tears already streaming down her face. "That's my daddy. Marcus." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know what to say. So many conflicting emotions hit him. Relief to know that Lila's father was really looking for her, confusion about the story that didn't match what Lila had told him, and a pang of pain at the realization that his time with her was coming to an end. But above all, there was the shock of the revelation. The man on TV clearly had no idea what had really happened to his daughter. He believed Lila had disappeared from the backyard, not that she had been deliberately abandoned on a road. Someone was lying. And considering what Lila had said about her stepmother, "Lila," Marcus said, kneeling beside her, "are you sure that's your dad?" She nodded vigorously, still crying. "It's Daddy. He's looking for me." Marcus grabbed a napkin and gently wiped her tears. "Yes, he is. And now we know where to find him." Marcus's mind was racing. He needed to call the police immediately, report that he had found Lila Whitford, explain the circumstances. But he also needed to prepare Lila for what was to come, the reunion with her father, but also the inevitable confrontation with the truth about what her stepmother had done. "We're going to call the police right now," Marcus said, picking up the phone. "We'll tell them we saw your dad on TV and that you're here, safe with me." Lila picked up Brownie, who was sitting on a nearby chair, and hugged him tightly. "Are we going to see Daddy today?" "I hope so, little one," Marcus replied, dialing the local police station. "I hope so." As he waited for the call to be answered, Marcus watched Lila, who was now smiling through her tears, clutching Brownie to her chest and looking at the TV, where other news was now playing. But the image of her father remained vivid in her memory. Marcus felt a mix of emotions: happiness for Lila, who would finally be reunited with her father, anger at the stepmother, who had lied and caused so much suffering, and finally, a pang of selfish sadness, knowing that he would soon have to say goodbye to the little girl who had brought so much light into his lonely life. When the dispatcher answered, Marcus took a deep breath. "Good morning. My name is Marcus Elwood. I'm calling because I just saw a news appeal about a missing girl, Lila Whitford. She's here with me. Safe." There was a moment of shocked silence on the other end of the line, and then a flurry of questions. Marcus briefly explained how he found Lila, promising to give all the details when they arrived at the station. Hanging up, Marcus turned to Lila, who was watching him with anxious eyes. "They're going to call your dad right now," he said, smiling despite the lump in his throat. and we're going to the police station to meet him." Lila jumped from her chair and ran to hug Marcus, her small arms barely reaching around his waist. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for helping me find my daddy." Marcus knelt and hugged her back, allowing himself for a brief moment to hold the child who had become so important to him. "You're welcome, little one," he murmured against her hair. "You're welcome." Finally, there was a lead. The mystery of Lila's disappearance was about to be solved, but Marcus knew the full story would be even more complicated and possibly more painful than any of them could imagine. The drive to Seattle was quiet. Marcus drove, focused on the road, while Lila, in the back seat, hugged Brownie and looked out the window. Occasionally, their eyes would meet in the rearview mirror, hers anxious, his trying to convey reassurance. "It's okay to be nervous," Marcus said softly, breaking the silence. "It's been a while since you've seen your dad." Lila nodded, hugging the bear tighter. "What if he's mad at me for getting out of the car?" The question squeezed Marcus's heart. Even after everything, she still blamed herself for what had happened. "Your dad isn't mad at you, Lila. He's worried and he misses you. Did you see how sad he looked on TV? That's because he misses you so much." That seemed to reassure her a little. She went back to looking out the window, watching the landscape change as they approached the big city. The police had arranged everything. First, they went to the Seattle police station, where Marcus explained in detail how he found Lila and what she had told him about her abandonment. The officers listened with serious expressions, taking notes and occasionally looking at Lila, who was drawing quietly at a nearby table. "Mr. Whitford is on his way," an officer informed them, entering the room. "He's been told that we found his daughter and well, he could barely speak. He was so emotional." Marcus nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. This was the moment, the end of the journey that had begun on that deserted road weeks ago. "As for the stepmother," the officer continued, lowering her voice so Lila wouldn't hear, "we're investigating. If what the girl says is true, she'll face serious charges." "It is true," Marcus affirmed with certainty. Lila wouldn't lie about something like that. The weight felt endless. Marcus sat next to Lila, helping her color, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy while his own heart pounded. What would he say to her father? What would it be like to see Lila leave with him? Suddenly, there was a commotion in the hallway. Hurried footsteps, an anxious male voice asking for Lila. The door to the room opened, and there he was, Derek Whitford, just like on TV, but even paler and visibly exhausted. For a second, time seemed to freeze. Derek stopped at the door, his eyes fixed on Lila. She looked up from her drawing and froze, the blue marker suspended in the air. "Lila," Derek whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. "Hi, Hattie," she exclaimed, dropping the marker. Derek crossed the room in 3 long strides and fell to his knees. Lila ran to him, and the two met in a desperate embrace. Derek lifted her up, holding her tightly against him, as silent sobs shook his shoulders. "My girl," he repeated between tears. "My little girl. You're okay. You're here." Marcus watched the scene with a heavy heart, happy for the reunion, but feeling a pang of loss he couldn't avoid. After long moments, Derek pulled Lila back just enough to look her in the eyes, touching her face as if to make sure she was real. "Where have you been? What happened? I was so worried." It was then that Lila's expression changed. She frowned, confused, and asked in a small voice, "What about my little brother? The new mommy said you were going to have a baby and that you didn't want me anymore." Derek's face transformed into a mask of shock and then painful understanding. He glanced briefly at Marcus, who nodded, silently confirming what Lila had told him. "Tanako, my love," Derek replied with a choked voice, holding her small hands in his. "That was never true. There is no baby. Claire is not pregnant, and I would never, ever stop wanting you, no matter what happened." Lila processed the information, her blue eyes searching for truth in her father's face. "But she said—" "She lied, sweetheart," Derek said gently. "And she did something very wrong. I looked for you every day, everywhere. I was so scared, wondering where you could be." "I was with Marcus," Lila explained, turning to where Marcus was sitting. He found me on the road and took me to his house. He gave me Brownie and took care of me." Derek looked at Marcus, then, really seeing him for the first time, his eyes were teary, and he seemed unable to find words. "Mr. Whitford," Marcus said, standing up and extending his hand. "Marcus Elwood. I found Lila on the shoulder of Highway 16 about 3 weeks ago. She was alone, scared. I took her home and have been trying to find her family ever since." Derek let go of Lila for a moment to shake Marcus's hand, but the formal gesture quickly turned into a hug. "You saved my daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "How can I ever thank you?" "There's no need," Marcus replied, embarrassed. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Derek disagreed, pulling away. "Not just anyone. You didn't just save her. You took care of her all this time. You made her feel safe when she was most vulnerable." Marcus then remembered the drawing notebook that Lila had forgotten in the car. "Wait a moment," he said, briefly leaving the room. When he returned, he handed the floral notebook to Derek. "Lila is a great artist. I think she'd like you to see her drawings." Derek flipped through the notebook, seeing page after page of colorful drawings, Lila and Marcus cooking together, walking in the park, feeding the fish, reading stories. A whole life captured in the simple lines of a 4-year-old. "Oh, you really took good care of her?" Derek said, moved. "She's an amazing girl," Marcus replied, looking at Lila fondly. Derek closed the notebook and looked seriously at Marcus. "I need to compensate you somehow. A reward." "I just did what was right," Marcus interrupted, shaking his head. "I don't need a reward for that." There was a moment of silent understanding between the two men, a recognition that some things are done not for money or recognition, but simply because they are the right thing to do. The police informed them that they would need to talk more with Derek about the investigation against Claire, and suggested he take Lila home so she could readjust. Derek nodded, picking up the small backpack Marcus had brought with Lila's few clothes and belongings. The moment of farewell had arrived. Marcus knelt to be at Lila's level, trying to control the emotion that threatened to overflow. "Well, little one, it's time. You're going home with your dad now." Lila looked at him with big blue eyes full of conflicting emotions, happiness at finding her father, but sadness at leaving Marcus. "You can keep Brownie," Marcus added, pointing to the bear she was still clutching. "He'll like your new house." "It's not new," Lila corrected. "It's my old house," Marcus smiled. "That's right." "Sorry." There was a moment of silence, and then Lila ran the last few steps to him and threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you for everything, Marcus," she whispered in his ear. Marcus hugged her back, closing his eyes for a moment, engraving that moment in his memory. When they separated, Lila looked at him seriously. "For you promise you'll visit me?" The question caught Marcus by surprise. He looked at Derek, uncertain. Derek nodded. "It would be a pleasure to have you in our home, Mr. Elwood. Any time." Marcus felt immense relief. It wouldn't be a final goodbye. "I promise," he replied, smiling at Lila. She smiled back, seeming satisfied with the answer. Then she took her father's hand, ready to go home. As they left the police station, Marcus watched the father and daughter walk away together. Lila turned one last time and waved, Brownie held firmly in her other arm. Marcus waved back, feeling a bittersweet mix of happiness and loss. As he drove back home, to a house that would now seem strangely empty, Marcus reflected on the past few weeks. What had started as a chance encounter on a deserted road had turned into one of the most profound experiences of his life. Lila had changed something in him, awakened a side he didn't know existed. And although it was hard to see her go, there was comfort in knowing she was where she was supposed to be, with her father who loved her, and that the doors were not closed to the future. Marcus smiled as he thought of the promise he had made. It was a promise he intended to keep. After all, some connections are too strong to be broken by distance or time. This was one of them. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room windows, creating golden patterns on the rug. Derek watched Lila sleeping on the sofa. Brownie held tightly against her chest. He couldn't take his eyes off her, as if he feared she might disappear again if he looked away. The phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Claire, for the third time since he had left the police station. Derek had ignored the previous calls, But now, with Lila safely asleep, it was time to face the truth. He answered and went out to the yard, where he could talk without disturbing his daughter's sleep. "Derek, where are you? What's going on?" Claire's voice sounded anxious, almost hysterical. "I found Lila," he replied dryly. There was a silence on the other end of the line, and then, "Oh my God, where? How is she?" The false concern in her voice made Derek's stomach turn. "I'm on my way home now," he said, keeping his voice controlled. "We need to talk." When he returned to the living room, he found Lila sitting up, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Hi, Princess," he said softly, sitting beside her. "Did you sleep well?" Lila nodded, adjusting Brownie in her lap. "Where are we going?" "Home," Derek replied. "Our home. Is Claire going to be there?" The question came loaded with fear, her blue eyes suddenly alert. "Yes, but don't worry. I'll be with you the whole time. And after today, she won't be living with us anymore." Lila hugged the bear tighter. "Promise?" "I promise, my love." The drive home was silent. Derek watched Lila in the rearview mirror, noticing how she grew more tense as they got closer. When he parked, he saw the living room curtains move. Claire was waiting. The door opened before they could reach it. Claire stood there, impeccably dressed, her face a mask of maternal concern. "My God, you're all right? We were so worried." Lila hid behind Derek's leg, refusing to look at her stepmother. Derek felt her small hand grip his tightly. "Come inside, Claire," he said coldly. "We need to talk." In the hall, Derek knelt before Lila. "Princess, can you go up to your room? I need to talk to Claire alone. I promise I'll be up to see you soon." Lila looked from Derek to Claire, hesitant. "Can I take Brownie?" "Of course you can," Derek smiled gently. "I'm sure he wants to see your room too." When Lila disappeared upstairs, Derek turned to Claire. His face had lost all its gentleness. "Living room?" "Now." Claire followed him, her worried expression giving way to something more cautious. She sat on the sofa, crossing her legs elegantly. "Where did they find her?" she asked, as if they were talking about a lost object. "A man found her abandoned on the side of a road, over 100 miles from here." Claire blinked, but her expression barely changed. "A road? That's absurd. She disappeared from the garden, you know that." "Stop it," Derek said, his voice low but firm. "Lila told me everything. How you took her for a drive, how you told her I didn't want her anymore because we were having a baby together, how you made her get out of the car and left her alone on the road." A heavy silence fell between them. For a long moment, Claire said nothing, just studied Derek with cold eyes. Then, to his surprise, she smiled, a smile without warmth, without humanity. "Why did you do it?" Derek finally asked. Claire lifted her chin, cold. "I don't like children. I never have. I made up that I was pregnant and that you didn't want her anymore. If I wanted her to suffer." The coldness of the reply hit Derek like a physical blow. "Then why did you marry me? You knew I had a daughter. You have money, Derek, a nice house, a good position, and I thought I could convince you to send her to a boarding school or leave her with your parents." She shrugged. "But you were so attached to her. You abandoned a 4-year-old child alone on a road." Derek's voice trembled. "She could have died." "But she didn't, did she?" Claire replied, impassive. "Someone found her, just like I knew they would." Derek took a deep breath, rage pulsing through his veins. "Get your things," he said finally, his voice heavy. "While you're not staying here anymore." Claire stood up, tense. "You can't just kick me out like this." "I can, and I will. I'm already filing for divorce." For a moment, they stared at each other in silence, years of marriage reduced to a chasm of betrayal. Then, Claire grabbed her purse and walked to the door. "I'll get the rest of my things tomorrow," she said coldly. When the door closed, Derek stood there, trembling slightly. Then he remembered Lila waiting upstairs. He went up the stairs and found Lila sitting on her bed, arranging her stuffed animals around Brownie. When she saw him, she stopped, her eyes questioning. "Is she gone?" she asked in a low voice. Derek nodded. "Yes, she's gone." Lila considered this for a moment, then asked in a whisper, "Do you promise she won't come back?" He held out his arms, and Lila came to him immediately. He hugged her tightly, feeling her small, warm body against his. "You can rest easy," he promised, his voice choked. "No one will ever separate us again. She's not coming back." "I promise." Lila relaxed against him, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her small shoulders. A few weeks later, on a sunny Sunday, Derek was in the kitchen when he heard the sound of a car parking. Lila, who had been drawing at the table, jumped up. "It's him, Daddy. Marcus is here." Derek followed her with a smile. Since the reunion, he had spoken several times with Marcus, building a relationship of mutual respect. When he reached the door, he saw Lila running across the yard, Brownie in one hand, her drawing notebook in the other. Marcus had just gotten out of his car and barely had time to steady himself before Lila threw herself into his arms. "You really came," she exclaimed as he lifted her into the air. "I promised, didn't I?" Marcus replied, smiling. Derek walked over to them and extended his hand. "Welcome, Marcus. We're glad you could come." The day passed in an atmosphere of quiet joy. Lila showed Marcus every corner of the house, and especially her new drawings, pages depicting her with her father, and often including Marcus as well. In the afternoon, they sat on the porch with lemonade. Lila played in the yard with Brownie, inventing some elaborate story involving the bear and her other dolls. "She's recovering well," Marcus commented, watching her. Derek nodded. "Thanks to you in large part. What you did for her, I'll never be able to thank you enough." Marcus smiled, shaking his head. "I think she did more for me. After everything I saw on my missions, I was coming back to an empty house with no purpose. Lila gave me something I didn't know I needed." The two men watched in silence as Lila ran across the lawn, laughing, the sun making her blonde hair shine like gold. There was a lightness to her now, a joy that came from the security of knowing she was loved and protected. Sitting there on the porch, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't just the relief of knowing Lila was safe. It was something deeper, a sense of belonging he had lost years ago. There, amidst fulfilled promises and true affection, they all found what they needed, a safe place. Not just a physical shelter, but that emotional space where they could be vulnerable and completely accepted. For Lila, it was the security of her father's love and the constant presence of Marcus in her life. For Derek, it was the chance to rebuild a better life with his daughter. And for Marcus, it was the family he never expected to find, born not of blood but of choices. Choices of kindness, courage, and love. As the sun began to set, Marcus knew he would keep coming back to this house, to these people who, in such a short time, had become so important in his life. And that, he realized with a smile, was enough. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.